Hello friends, welcome back to this online lecture series on earthquake resistant design of structures. As you know, we are discussing a very important feature of earthquake resistant design, and that is ductility. In the previous lecture, we have discussed regarding how the behavior of columns takes place when subjected to earthquake forces or lateral forces, and at the same time we also discussed the different provisions mentioned in IS 13920 for the ductile detailing of columns. In this particular lecture, next we are going to talk about the ductile detailing of beam column joint. So let us start today's discussion where we first try to understand the type of failure pattern that happens in beam column joint, and then we will move ahead with the further aspect of detailing. So when I talk about the beam column joint, then as we have discussed earlier, that when two columns, that is the vertical members and a horizontal member which is the beam, these three members combine together to form the lateral load resisting frame. But what happens is that the common portion of the column where the beams are integrated, that particular joint is known as the beam column joint. Now, since these materials are going to likely to be constitute of having the constituent materials at this particular joint are likely to have limited strength, as a result of that, the joint is also going to have limited strength. And due to this limited strength, the possibility is that this particular joint becomes a vulnerable joint in case of lateral forces. Right? So our effort has to be in such a manner that we need to increase the strength of this particular joint in order to avoid the shear failure in case of earthquake loading. That is, once this particular joint is going to be damaged under the effect of shear force or shear failure, then the repairing of this joint is very difficult, and that is why the only possible solution that is there with us is to avoid this shear failure at this particular joint. Now the question comes is how we can avoid this particular joint, or what actually happens when the lateral forces are going to act. Now, as you can see in the figure over here, the enlarged view of a beam column joint is shown, where the column is going through and the two beams are there from the two sides. Now the moment directions are also shown. So what is going to happen is that whenever the load is going to be applied on this beam column joint or this moment resisting frame, then as a result of that, the moments are likely to be generated. These moments can be either in clockwise direction or it can be in the anti-clockwise direction. On both the faces of the columns, the same type of moment is likely to be generated. So right, so when this particular thing is going to happen, then as a result of that, what is going to happen is that the top bars of the beam are likely to be pushed in one particular direction, and the bottom bars of the beam are likely to be pushed in the opposite direction. Once this movement will be initiated, then as a result of that, a couple will be generated, and when the couple is generated, then as a result of that, certain portion of the column is going to be in tension, certain portion of the joint is going to be in compression. Now what is going to happen is that the joint that is going to be the portion of the joint that is going to be in tension, from there on the slipping of bars is likely to take place. If the bond between the concrete and the steel is not sufficient, then as a result of that, the slipping of bars is likely to take place. And if the slipping of bar takes place, then as a result of that, the load carrying capacity of that particular beam at that junction is likely to be lost, and when that thing will happen, then the shear failure or the brittle failure will be initiated, and as a result of that, we will see damage in the particular joint. Right? So same thing is explained here by means of figure, where you can see two types of effect or two types of phenomena are taking place due to the pull and push action. In the first case, the loss of grip of bars in the beam is shown. In the second case, the distortion of the joint is shown. Right? So if I talk about the first case, then in the first case I can see that the top bars are going to be in compression, the bottom bars are going to be in tension. Right? And what is going to happen is that the resistance is going to be offered from these bars in the opposite direction, but this resistance will depend on the bond stress that is developed between the concrete and the steel. Right? And if this bond stress is good, then it will be able to transfer the forces further in the column. But if the bond stress is not good, then as a result of that, the loss of grip may take place, and the load and the moment cannot be transferred. And when this particular thing will be happening, then as a result of that, the compression and tension zone will be developed, and the tension zone will be the stress zone, and from that particular zone onward, the diagonal failure or the crushing of concrete is likely to be initiated, which is shown in the form of distortion of the joint. And when this distortion of joint will be there, then the type of damage is likely to be of irreparable nature, which is going to be very difficult to repair. And that is why some solution has to be brought, which is going to avoid this crushing of concrete. Right? So as we have seen in the last slide, that a distortion of joint is going to result in the diagonal cracking and the crushing of concrete in the joint region, and this should be prevented in order to ensure the good performance of the beam column joint when subjected to lateral loads. Now the question comes is, how can we increase the strength of this beam column joint? Then there are possibly three options which we can have. The first option is that the dimension of the column should be sufficient enough so that the anchorage of the bars is possible. Second, the concrete strength has to be sufficient enough, which is going to increase the bond strength of the column and the reinforcing bars. And third case is that the transverse reinforcement should be provided in sufficient amount, which will confine the concrete area, and the crushing of concrete can be avoided by increasing the shear capacity. Right? And there is also going to be the confinement is going to be by two factors. First is the provision of transverse reinforcement. Second is the provision of intermittent bars of the columns. These will also help in confining the concrete section. And once this is achieved, then as a result of that, the shear capacity of the section is going to increase, and as a result of that, it will be able better to resist the shear forces that are going to be there. Right? So the Indian Standard Code, that is IS 13920, is suggesting that the transverse reinforcement or the special confining reinforcement that is provided below the beam column joint and above the beam column joint should also be extended along the length of the beam column joint. Now how this is possible, let us see. Right, so as you can see, two figures are shown. In the first figure, the elevation is shown of the beam column joint, where you can see that the top bars of the beams are going through the columns, the bottom bars of the beams are also going through the column, and in between the vertical, you can see the red lines are shown, which indicate the provision of special confining reinforcement. Now it is easy to understand over here that the stirrups are to be provided within the beam column joint, and as a result of that, the shear capacity of the section at that particular section is going to be increased. But the practical aspect is that in most of the cases, you will hear this complaint on the side, whether you are showing it on the drawing or not, the provision or the actual provision of this particular stirrups on side is going to be difficult. So how this can be understood, or how this can be explained to the contractor or the person who is working on the site, that has been shown by means of a sketch, which is a three-stage process. So if I talk about the first stage, then in case of the first stage, what is to be done is that the bottom bars of the beams are to be placed, as you can see in the figure. Once the bottom bars are to be placed, then the transverse loop or the special confining rings that we are going to provide, this should be stacked over the bottom bars. That is the first stage. In the second stage, as you can see, the top bars of the beam should be placed, and these top bars and the bottom bars should be connected with each other by means of vertical stirrups that we provide in case of beams. Once this is done, then the reinforcing cage should be lowered in the formwork. That is the second stage. And in the third stage, once the formwork is placed in position, then what is to be done is that these transverse loops that are stacked at the bottom of the bars should be increased in height as per the spacing that is shown in the drawing, and they should be tied with the main reinforcing bars, that is from the columns or from the beams, by means of the binding wires. And if this sequence is followed, then the provision of special confinement reinforcement in the beam column joint is going to be a very easy process. Right? Then the other criteria, that is to ensure the sufficient strength of the beam column joint, is to have sufficient width or sufficient dimension of the column. Why this is necessary? Again, two cases are shown over here, where in the first case you can see that the width of the column is limited, that is narrow width of the column is provided, and in the second case you can see the larger width of the column is provided. So what is the problem with the narrow width of the column? That is, you are going to have the column orientation in two types. First orientation is such that the width of the beam is going to coincide with that, the width of the column is going to coincide with that of the beam. And in the second case, the depth of the column is going to coincide with that of the beam. So when the width of the column is going to coincide with that of the beam, then as a result of that, when you are going to provide the anchorage length, as we have seen in the last class, that is the anchorage length of the reinforcing bars of the beam at top and bottom should be minimum LD plus 10 times the bar diameter. Yesterday I took the example of 16 mm diameter, where 960 mm was the output, right? So as you can see in the first case, if the depth of the beam is limited to 450 or 600 mm, then the top reinforcing bars that you are going to encourage is going below the soffit of the beam, and it has to be anchored in the column below. But that will not be practically possible on site. Why? Because the sequence of construction on site is such that first the columns are casted up to the bottom of the beam, and then the false work of the beam is prepared, and then the reinforcing cage of the beam is lowered. So already the column is casted, then how is it possible to anchor the remaining length of the bar in the column? So that is not possible. And that is why this particular practice of narrow width of the column is considered as a poor practice. On the other side, if you have larger width of the column, then in that case what is going to happen is that sufficient depth is going to be there of the column where the anchorage can be done, and as a result of that the full anchorage can be achieved, and it will be accommodated within the soffit of the beam itself. And if this is happening, then sufficient amount of strength is likely to develop at the beam column junction. Right? So the first case is regarding the elevation, the anchorage in elevation. Second case is the anchorage in case of plant, where again two cases are shown. First case is the exterior column and second is the interior column. That is, the beam bars are to be passed from the exterior column and beam bars are to be passed from the interior column. So it is shown over here that in the first case the beam bars are bent and then they are taken through the columns, and in the second case the planning is done in such a way, that is the dimensioning of the position of the reinforcing bars is done in such a way that the beam bars will pass through and through the columns from within and they will not need to be bended. So when this bending of bars will be done in the first case as it is shown over here, then in that case what is going to happen is these bars are going to be overstressed. They are going to undergo additional stress, and when additional stress will happen, then as a result of that the additional shear stress is likely to be generated, and that is likely to result in some kind of cracking at that particular junction. So the good practice is such that the position of reinforcing bars of the beam should be done in such a manner from the starting itself that they are able to pass through and through from the column without getting intersected with the vertical bars of the column or the stirrups that are provided. Right? So that is the good practice. And lastly, we have one sketch or one figure that is taken from the Mexico earthquake where the shear failure of the beam column joint is highlighted. Right? So you can see how critical these detailings are for the good performance of the beam column joint when subjected to lateral loads. Hope this lecture series has given you an enough insight on the importance of ductility for the good performance of reinforced concrete buildings when subjected to lateral loads. Stay tuned for the further lecture series. Hope you have enjoyed today's lecture as well. Thank you.